And who knows, someday maybe our dreams will all come true. A cradle and a baby, the West, the nest, and you.
Hi. While they're giggling, I'll say hello. This is Thelma, and we're going to make a tape of our memories, we hope, of when we were kids. And this is
Bertha, and today is November 10th, 1985.
And this is Grace, and this is a cold, snowy afternoon.
About 7.5 inches of snow on the ground. Plenty of ice.
following a most beautiful 68-degree days just before the day's weather changed.
Okay, well, we're going to try to talk about our memories. So, Thelma, you're the oldest, so you want to remember.
Well, yes.
Start yours.
The first thing I remember, I believe, is when Bertha was born. It was a very exciting day. They chased us out of the house and called the doctor, and they brought his handsome son along. And while I went out trailing along with the boys out in the barnyard looking at the cattle and everything, and with this doctor's son, why, pretty soon they called in and said, well, you can come in now. And they came in, and surprise, surprise, there was Bertha and Mom in a bed in the living room, would you believe, the parlor. And what an exciting day that was.
And I was the number 7 with
Right.
4 brothers and 2 sisters ahead of me. My first memory is of Thelma pushing me in the rocking chair. Evidently her feet were too short to touch the floor, so the rocking chair was up toward the wall, and she pushed her feet against that to make the rocking chair run.
It was a different kind of a rocker than we have today, but I remember that one too. Oh, that was a fun time. I used to do that many times. She was a good kid to rock.
Yeah. We didn't tell him on this where we were born, did we?
No, that's...
We were born at Canton, Kansas.
Yes.
Between Hillsboro and McPherson, Kansas, about halfway between. We all grew up on the same farm that our dad did, and his parents died before I was born anyway.
What was it, a mile south of, or 2 miles south of Canton?
And 2 miles east, wasn't it?
Yeah, believe so.
Mile and a half east.
And none of us went to high school, huh?
No.
Because we lived out in the country. And
Yeah,
our road
actually-
always blocked with snow and got so drifted in the wintertime.
After all, it was a no-no. It was a worldly thing to go to high school in our days.
I would like to have thought that,
No.
I didn't get to.
Well, I remember one of the first times I went to school to visit, I was so excited, and the guys were playing baseball, and I went right smack dab through the middle of the game right while they were hitting, and got the baseball in my eye. And it was a black eye. I'll never forget my initiation into school days.
I remember walking to school through the field or pastures and fence across the fences. When I got too tired, my brother Norman carried me on his shoulders part of the time. And it was 3/4 of a mile through the field where we walked around the road. It was 1 3/4 miles.
I have great memories of that, too. I used to stumble in the badger holes and scramble lunch every day.
And spill your lunch pail. As you did it.
And one time she fell out of the car when we were driving. I don't know why, but anyway, the door came open, and that was
Must have gone around the corner
a
too fast.
calamity. Imagine.
That was an old Model T, I think.
Probably.
I remember John driving when I was the last one going to school. The roads were a little icy, and he drove, and one side of the car slipped in the ditch.
I don't remember that, but one
And
time...
crawl in out of the high side and get out.
I remember one time the car wouldn't go forward, we had to go backwards.
That must have been quite a vacuum. section.
I'm not sure where it started or anything.
One thing I remember about it, Marvin and I were same age for all of 1 week, and so when we went to school, Mom kept me back for a whole year because I was so little. So when we went to school and we were both in the same grade, they said, "Are you twins?" They said, "No, we're not twins." They said, "How come you're both in the same grade?" And I didn't know, but all I knew was I was in the same grade as Marv.
How come you're the same age and you're
And
not twins?
Right. But anyway, that's the mystery I remember about that. But I remember Marv was kind of an ornery kid in school. And one time he was walking along. Well, he'd raise himself way high on one leg and down on the other. In other words, he was bouncing up and down as he walked around in the schoolroom, and when he had to go to the bathroom. And when he came back in the room, after doing that, the teacher landed the football at him and surprised him slightly and made me feel terribly, terribly, terribly sick because he threw that thing at my favorite little brother.
Isn't that the time you made him walk around the school
Yes.
that way?
Yeah, that's right. I just saw this on here. But anyway, he had to walk clear around the school while we all watched after that time.
And this was a one-room schoolhouse with all 8 grades in the one school. I remember Uncle Bill, which is my uncle now. I mean, he isn't anymore because he isn't living. But for our hot lunch program, we put a big pan of water on top of the furnace in the wintertime, and if we had something like soup or something we wanted warm for lunch, why, we put it in that pan of water on top of the school. You girls don't remember
I
that?
don't remember that. No.
Maybe that was after you were out of school.
Oh, no, it was a modern invention, I think, being behind us.
Yeah.
I remember my first day of school. There had a class up in front, and anyhow, the teacher asked if a bear was big or little or something like that, and I answered from back where I was sitting anyway. I didn't know
That was
better.
the one advantage of the one-room school. We all learned together.
Learned the big kids' things as well as ours.
Do you remember the time we had the big dust storm and got so black we
Yes.
couldn't see?
And the cows came in from the pasture, and the chickens went to roost, and I felt like I was suffocating. I didn't think I could breathe. Ooh.
I had much trouble with breathing, but it scared us because it got so black.
It seemed like it was just kind of suffocating. Every time I think about it, it still feels that way. I did pretty good in school. I remember getting on the honor roll quite often in the last couple of years, and my favorite subjects were arithmetic, which I can't imagine. I can't add 1 and 1 hardly now, but anyway, I enjoyed that, and spelling. But geography, I got lost at that thing.
Oh, I love geography.
I kind of loved it, but I sure couldn't remember any dates and stuff in the history and some of that world. And
Well, I did good in my spelling, I think, in English, but I don't... What else I did? History I hated. And I'm sure I didn't do good on that.
no, that was my worst subject, I believe, is remembering dates. Figures I've had problem with all my life, as you can tell by the looks of me now. Oh, anyway.
Okay, I'm going to mention when Mom died.
Yes, that was horrid.
Yeah, she died from the results of the fire that she started a cook stove fire and got a hold of gasoline instead of kerosene. And fire blazed up and caught the tea towels on fire above the old cook stove.
And the curtains.
Curtain in the wall and blistered the paint.
No, was there
Grace
any...
and Norman and I came down the stairs way right into the kitchen in the fire, and we got blisters on our arms and blisters on our feet from the linoleum being blistered.
And I was coward, and I dropped out the east story window, which had an old couch underneath of it. That was the second story window, and I have had a hip that's bothered once in a while ever since. But I sure remember that. I remember when they brought her home for the funeral, I just could not go in, and they always brought people home and kept them in there the day before the funeral, and somebody stayed with the body all night. And I remember how I just didn't want to see her that way. I wanted to see her alive and not that way. But the undertaker's wife was such a sweet person, and she persuaded me to go in with the family. I remember that. That was a horrid experience.
I remember how pleased Mom was when she heard we'd made some bread on our own.
Did we do that before she died?
That's while she's in the hospital.
Yeah.
No, that's right. I guess we did.
She lived about a week.
2
She
weeks.
lived
I
2
think.
weeks.
Mhm.
Yeah. I remember they had this tent over her because she was burned so bad she couldn't have the covers up next to her. And then they had light bulbs in there, I guess, to help to dry up those burns. And how it smelled so bad we couldn't stand to go in the room.
Well, it was very badly burned. She had gangrene. That's probably why the odor was so bad, I suppose.
The reason she got burned so bad is her old corset. That smothered underneath of that, and I remember her fingernails, I think, came off trying to get undressed.
On the left hand especially, I remember, and I helped undress her, and that was a real scary experience. I rang the telephone. We had an old, long, 20-member telephone line, and you'd ring one certain kind of a ring, which meant emergency, because it wasn't anybody's number. And I remember I had to ring that and tell them we had a fire. And then here come people, and we had a bucket brigade and outened that fire in no time flat. But we outened it so fast that Russell lived right across the creek from us, and he didn't even know what was going on till he saw everybody in there. We forgot to tell him.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
Yes, I remember. He was so upset here. All those people came, and he didn't know what was going on because we forgot to.
And they didn't have a telephone that pretty soon.
No, I don't think so. They used ours.
And how we had to learn to after Mom died.
Well, we learned a big lot of it from Aunt Alta, I think. We'd call her every
Aunt Cora?
time.
Yeah, I learned a lot of cooking from Aunt Cora.
I remember calling Aunt Alta most of all.
I did a lot of baking and things like that ahead of time, but
Well, I do remember Mom used to bake cakes and pies. We had an old kerosene stove we used to bake in if we didn't use the old wood range. But our old wood range thing was a kind of a nice thing. We could bake in it, and we also had a hot water tank on it. But I remember when she had a cake that wasn't any good and it fell, and we could eat it. Otherwise, it was usually a company cake for some of our Sunday dinners we had. And we used to have lots and lots of Sunday dinners.
Cakes and pies and cookies and things were just treats for Sunday usually.
And
We had cakes and pies anyway.
when Dad would used to go down to sell the sheep at Wichita, then he'd bring home a box of crackers and broken cookies that he could get. A big tin box of crackers and cookies that were real reasonable because they were broken. So that was treats too.
I didn't remember the occasion why he went to Wichita, but I remember those big boxes of crackers.
Usually to sell the sheep or the cattle when we had cows to sell.
Once in a while he'd bring bananas home, and oh, that was a treat.
Yep, that was almost like, can't name anything to equal it today.
And for Christmas we have an orange and some candy, and the orange was always such a treat.
And a pencil. That
Pencil?
was
I didn't remember the
a
pencil.
new pencil, I think,
But-
quite often.
The candy he bought, that was a Christmas present for him too, because he got a galvanized bucket full of candy.
Mm-hmm.
So he could use the galvanized
I
bucket.
didn't remember that part.
No, I forgot that, but I remember they were
Ordered
all
that
in
from
buckets.
Sears or Montgomery Ward's, I think.
Well,
Speaking of ordering things from Ward's, you remember most all our material Mom would buy in these bundles that you wouldn't have any choice of just a certain type of material. And
Yeah, I can remember that.
And our shoes, a lot of times we'd get that way. I remember one time I had a pair of white shoes. No, I was so thrilled about it, and they had said no white, and they made a mistake and they gave them a white one. And I think they were too tight for her, but I wore them anyhow.
I remember my first pair of white shoes anyway were too tight and made my toes sore.
but you probably wore them
But I
anyway.
had to
huh?
wear them.
Oh,
Sure.
usually we were so proud of them, we wore them whether our feet hurt or not, didn't we?
Yeah. There wasn't much choice, I don't think. I think when we got a pair of shoes, that was it.
I remember we had a traveling salesman who used to come around and sell materials, though. You remember anything about that guy?
So I
He used
remember
to stay at our house all night.
Oh, I remember the Watkins man and the Raleigh man or whatever that used to come around and sell.
they used to come and sell some other things too, but I don't know how. I mean, this one that sold material, did he have other things too?
I don't
besides
remember
that?
what he had, but I remember he could repeat poetry like nobody's business. around the table. One memory I have of my early days is when Grandpa Loucks had an old Model T Ford, and we were playing with it, and somebody closed the door, and I got a pinched finger that I still have a puffed up spot. And I'll never forget that, how I cried.
I thought you were going to remember his horse and buggy.
Well, I remember his horse.
Grandma with the horse and buggy anyway.
Yeah, what we're speaking about, what are some of your memories of Grandpa?
I don't remember Grandpa especially, what he did. I remember he fixed our little old red rocking chair over and over. Maybe it wasn't a rocking chair, but I remember he came over and fixed it. And one day he came over with Grandma in the buggy, and he fixed that thing. He said, "This is the last time. I'm not do it again." And he never got fixed again. But I don't remember much about Grandpa.
I
remember Grandma coming over sometimes to help Mom do the mending.
Yes,
she came in her horse and buggy.
I guess I remember that good part about Grandma, but the thing I remember most about her was if we didn't wear black socks or long strings on our coverings, or part our hair in the middle, and comb our hair very plain, she thought we were going straight to hell, I think. And that part I remember about Grandma most of all.
Guess I didn't remember that.
I do remember that because I was one of the first ones in our neighborhood to part my hair on the side, probably.
Oh. It's one of the things I remembered on Sunday afternoons, how we would get together as cousins, one Uncle Fred's or Uncle Joseph's, and we'd sing and we'd sing and we'd sing.
Around the old organ sometimes.
The old pump organ.
Yeah, pump organ,
Yep, I remember that. And most everybody was singers in both families, or all three families.
Yes.
And that was really
That's where we learned to sing, I guess.
Mm-hmm. We used to sure got the taste for it, without a doubt. And it used to be the neighborhood gathering place on Sunday afternoons for the young folks as we got older too, remember? We used to fight up and have a whole gang out on our front porch every Sunday afternoon.
I remember getting together with the cousins with their instruments and playing.
Mm-hmm.
Thelma played the accordion, the ukulele, and what else?
I played the mandolin and guitar more often and the ukulele.
During those times. Marvin the guitar and John the
harmonica and Norman the violin.
Guitar,
And once in a while we had a banjo.
And our cousins getting together. One time at Uncle Joseph's, they were really getting with it, really enjoying it. And all at once Uncle Joseph came in and said, "That sounds entirely too much like a dance."
Oh.
And that ended that evening's fun.
I don't remember that.
Oh, I do. And remember when Grace and I went to work at Bucky's at Roxbury?
Yeah.
It was after Mom died. Then when we came home, somebody wanted to invite one of us out for dinner or Sunday afternoon. I mean, none of us would go unless they invited all three of us.
I remember that very well.
And when I was up at Bucky's, when I was up there, I know she had a heart attack and came home from the hospital, and they thought she was all right. And I don't know, I think it was the same day or the next day, anyhow, she died. And I was standing there, I sat there and held on to her for a long time when we went to get the doctor or something, but she was dead by the time you got back.
I didn't remember that. I remember she died, but I didn't remember that.
Didn't remember you were there. When our dad had some mental problems when I was young, I guess when we were older too. But he was in the state hospital in Topeka for a while when I was young. And I remember we went to visit him once and stayed in the hotel overnight. The sounds of the city kept me awake most of the night. Just weren't used to that city noise. Some of the games we used to play when we were kids were Andy over, and that we was throwing a ball over the house. And one group of people were on the one side of the house and the other on the other side, and then they would catch the ball and maybe come around and catch us. I'm not sure. The one from the one side that caught the ball would run around and catch the ones on the other side. And then we played hide and seek. Those were some of our main games that we used to play. Okay,
one of my memories was one time Dad's sisters came back. I suppose Uncle Dan probably was along too. But anyway, when they were kids, they used to play out there along the creek. They'd play Old Mother Goose Died. And in that game, you'd start it out, Old Mother Goose Died. One person would say this, and then they'd say, how'd she die? Then you'd shake your one hand. And then you'd say, oh, Mother Goose died, and then they'd say how you die, and then you shake both hands. And then go on, you'd use your feet, and I think you ended up using your head. So anyhow, this time when they came back there in the pasture, and they played this game and rolled down the hill. Oh, when you...
Mother Goose died, we rolled down the
Yeah,
hill.
you shook your head and all these, and then they rolled down the hill.
After we did all the motions.
Yeah, the motions.
That was a fascinating sight.
I'm sure it must have been with the ants doing it too. I remember how we used to walk to church on Sunday evenings in the summertime, and we sang and we sang and we sang.
And I remember once I went in my old milking shoes, and that was the most awful experience because here I was in there with those speckled things, and I didn't mind if I'd just seen me. Couldn't very well go barefooted either. Too big.
And then I was thinking about how when we used to go to church, the women sat on the one side and the men on the other, and we even went in the separate doors there to begin with. Those west doors called ante rooms. One was for women and one was for men.
Yes, and they sat in those little corners up there, and I remember this one friend, Harry Seltzer, was the most joyful singer in the church, and he couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. But he just sang and sang and sang so joyfully, and that was one of the things I missed the very most after he was gone. And we went home, and when we got there, I just kept looking up at that corner because he wasn't there. It just was one thing I sure do remember. This husband of mine's being silly around here is what we're all giggling about.
I remember going caroling and singing these German songs with the...
Yeah, that was fun.
Jonas Erschienen.
Yeah. I can't pronounce the words right.
I can't either.
Now we sang one time at elder school and sang the German song in we sang it in English, and then here it was sung in German at the same program, and he didn't know that it was the same song. So we were so embarrassed when we found out that we were singing it in English and they were singing it in German.
We sang quite a few places. In PTAs and things, didn't we?
And weddings. We sang at Waldo and Hilda's wedding, and I'll never forget how terrified I was. We went into this strange church and walked up onto the stage and sang. And
without even seeing the inside of the church before.
I thought it was Alexanderville, but they said it wasn't.
No, it's Tabor Church.
But it was a big thing. And
it was Tabor Church.
We were so scared that we sang horrible.
We did, and the words barely came out because we couldn't breathe. I tell you.
Didn't think we kept a tune.
That was awful.
So we sang at their reception, and after the wedding at their house, and we sang to prove that we could.
Yeah.
Remember the time we went to protection? John, I guess, and us went to protection, and he'd been away for the while, I guess, working someplace else, and he hadn't heard us sing in 3 parts.
Oh, I remember
Now
that.
we sang almost the whole way down. One of us would think of a song, or we'd be talking.
The rest and nest and you dear and all those little things.
That was one of the songs.
Everything we saw, we think of a song to match the occasion, the streams and
the red sails in the sunset.
Yeah.
Red sails in the sun.
The west, the nest, and you dear.
Right. And I remember how his eyes just about popped out of his head. And
how far was it to protection? How long did it take us to
200 miles, and I don't know how long it took us.
All day.
But I remember our brothers had Model A roadsters, and we rode out in the rumble seat, and one time it snowed and got cold, and there was 4 of us. I had to ride all the way home in the front seat on one of my brother's laps. I don't remember which. There was 4 of us in the front seat of a little old Model A Ford Coupe, a roadster.
One of my first memories of going to protection, I think, was in an old Model T or something. Something was awful. It was really gassy, I know that.
We had an old 1919 or 1920 Model T. And that brings back another memory that my first experience in driving was with that critter. I wasn't supposed to, but my brother Marvin and I decided we could herd that thing up the hill. Anyway, I drove it. It came down the hill from the west there by the old sheds and stuff, and I turned it there, and I didn't roar it soon enough, and it went into the sheep pen. I remember that. So, of course, Dad found out about my driving, and I wasn't supposed to drive. I was too young, slightly. At least I hadn't had any experience.
And yes, and you